In this episode of Therapists Uncut, to you crew, you do not want to miss this. We are with author Kathryn Inman, Christian author, who is the author of Counting Spoons, a memoir of heroin, hope, and heartache. So please make sure you join us to watch Kathryn.
It ends with a hope.
I know, I had it backwards.
That was a
There's no order. It's not
Let me read it. A memoir of heroin, heartache, and hope. I'll just read it next time.
That was a literary decision to end with hope.
Yes, totally.
And that's what we're here to do. Yeah. And that's what Kathryn has so graciously agreed to do, is come speak with you about her journey, her family struggles, and the hope that is there for everybody. So we're super grateful.
Yeah, I'm really excited, just super honored to be here and to share with you all our journey. Addiction is everywhere, and we were fortunate to come out on the other side. So I hope that you'll stay tuned and listen. I hope you'll read the book and share it with anybody that can help, because no one is too far gone and we have to keep fighting. So anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for letting me be here.
Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Nahara.
Therapists Uncut, welcome back. We are glad to have you, and we are especially glad to have our guest today, Kathryn Mae Inman, for many reasons. One, we're just super stoked that you're here.
Me too.
And she has I don't know if it's an honor or an anxiety-provoking experience of being the first in-person guest on the TU show. Because COVID, we've had to do all of our interviews virtually. So thank you for being a guinea pig.
Sure. It's actually, when you guys asked me if I wanted to do it in person or by Zoom, it was the first time I'd even heard that option in 3 years. So I was like, yeah, I'm down. And then I got off the phone. I was like, oh, do I want to do that? But yeah, ultimately, there's nothing like being in person. So I'm super happy.
It's been nice to have opportunities like this.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Sure. So we know Kathryn, and some of our listeners probably do as well. But for those who don't, and maybe for those who know her but don't know her story, I'm going to read a little bio about Kathryn. All right. Kathryn exposes her heart and her faith in her debut book, Counting Spoons, as modeled by Alyssa. Kathryn is a former operations director for a nonprofit organization where she worked for over 30 years. Where we actually met Kathryn. Yeah. Then she resigned, traded in her high heels for flip-flops, and moved to Hawaii, where she discovered her passion for writing. A little jealous about the Hawaii piece. Now semi-retired and back in California, she writes, is an advocate for families affected by addiction, and is determined to spread a message of hope to anyone that will listen. Having dealt with many trials in her life, Kathryn is a writer who exposes it all. Thick layers of suffering, hard truths, deep pain, and hope in Christ that will leave her readers feeling inspired. I can attest to that. I read it and I was inspired. She loves Jesus, her husband, their beautiful blended family, healthy living, nature, and horses. Kathryn has a lofty disdain for chocolate, pancakes, and anything sweet, other than her 3 grandchildren, who she claims are the sweetest of all.
They're so sweet.
How old are the best? So we hear.
Yeah. So Everly Grace is our oldest. She'll be 4 in June. And then Jeremiah Dean will be 2 next week. Okay. And then Ledger McKnight, our youngest grandson, he will be 2 in November.
I like how close they are. They'll be able to go.
Well, my boys do everything, like all the bad stuff like that, all the good stuff. They both got married and had families within 3 years.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It was so sweet. And I don't even care about my kids anymore. Just give me the grandkids.
And that's what we hear. We hear grandkids are the best.
I was not prepared. It's so fun. Yeah, they just make me so happy. They're just beautiful.
So 3 grandkids. Tell us a little bit. Who else is Kathryn's family?
Okay, so Darwin, I call him my dreamboat husband.
He sounds like a dream.
He is.
Yeah.
He really is. And I'm...
Shout out.
Yes. Hey, Darwin.
He hates it when I call him dreamboat, but I just do it. Probably because he doesn't like it. But we were both married before. Darwin has 2 children. I have my stepdaughter, Shaylin, who I met when she was just 9 months old. So she was like my first love. And then I had my 2 biological sons. So together our blended family is 5 adult children, and we're close to all of them. All 5 of them are just super cool. And everybody's healthy and functioning and, living in different places, but we are close. All of us are. So yeah, that's our family. Just a little more about me, just as you know, I worked at the center for so long, and it was a big job. I mean, in charge of operations and administration and all those things. And I had been there for so long. I felt like I didn't have any creative side of my brain working. I didn't have time for it to.
Yeah. Well, and you probably didn't have the emotional space for that either, based after reading your book.
Right. Like, how was I even and showing up? I don't know.
And there's so much that I think we came to the realization of as we were reading your book as well, that just made so much sense in our head, and we get it now. And so we will let you guys in on the conversation, I promise.
Yeah.
But what was it like for you, Kathryn? I always like to ask to hear your bio being read out loud.
It gives me goosebumps. It really captures, I think it's my whole life has changed in the last 4 years drastically in the most beautiful way. So when I hear that, it just fills me up. It makes me happy because 10 years ago, if you would have said, you're going to quit your job and become a writer and be blessed with these beautiful grandbabies and all the kids, I would have laughed what? There's no way. And my dad was a writer.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But you said there's no way.
But it never even occurred to me.
Okay.
I mean, I was good at emails. People would hit me up.
I've been on the receiving end of some of those very well composed emails.
To hit me up to compose certain things. And, I had, I like to put words together, but never would have dreamed that I would write a book. But man, I dig it. It is I feel more like I am in my purpose and in my passion than ever.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. When I semi-retired, it was early, not a responsible decision. I'm going to quit my job because financially and stuff. It was more all right, I'll go to Hawaii. Let's check it out.
I would be there.
Yeah.
That's when the best memories happen.
But yeah, so to me, it's I'm in this sweet season of life of doing what I love and being available to the people I love. So yeah.
And we get to learn more about this side of Kathryn, because the Kathryn we know was the hard worker, always had her head down, ready to go, handled things, right?
Yeah.
Because she was the director of operations where all of us were.
And I actually have a story about that. So we worked with Kathryn, and I was always intimidated by you. Not always, initially. And I don't really, that didn't make sense to me because I am not one that's intimidated by authority figure. I don't know if it comes from being an only child for many years, but adults and authority never intimidated me. And then I spent time in a smaller group setting with you, one of the committees we were on. And I remember leaving that going, oh, I'm not intimidated anymore. And as I was reading this book, I had so many moments, and I'm sure your book speaks to everybody differently. And as I was reading that, I just had so many moments of, well, that was why. She was distracted. I can't even imagine showing up every day like you did while you were managing all of this. And it was just for me a reminder that you never know what somebody is going through. And to us, I don't know, I think I'm speaking for both of us. You were this person that had it all together.
Oh, for sure.
Everything handled, always business, just tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
And
I would always pay attention to the clothes, always put together on the outside. I felt like you had a lot of good fashion when I'd pass you in the hallway.
Nice.
We call it the executive hallway because all of the clinicians were on top and all of the executive offices downstairs. And when you're this new person, you're like, walk past her, look down. And that's how we remember Kathryn. And so I will tell you guys, I'm going to be honest. You guys know I have an ADD brain already. I am very good at starting books and never finishing them. Counting Spoons by Kathryn Inman is the first book that I started and finished in this year. And for me, that's huge. Yes.
we're halfway through the year.
So thank you,
That's a claim to
Kathryn.
fame.
We are
That's
halfway
amazing.
through the year.
No.
Why did I finish it though? Because it was awesome. It was the most beautiful thing. And that's what we're going to go into next, is Kathryn telling us about her story and how she came to writing Counting Spoons, because it is one of the most heart-wrenching, beautiful stories, but it's not a story, right? It's your life and it's your son's life. So tell us more about Counting Spoons.
Okay. Counting Spoons is, it's my heart between pages. It is, it's interesting because, I've said I had no plans to become an author or write. And as you know, in reading it, I was very private. Didn't talk to anybody about what I was going through. And even after my son got clean, I didn't have plans to really talk to anybody about it. And I am a woman of God. He found me in a place that I was so broken, and he rescued me. He rescued my son. So my whole lens of how I see the world, how I love people, all that has changed. And it was like he put on my heart, I needed to write it. And so I did. And through this book reveals my most vulnerable moments, my deepest fears, those darkest days that no one knew until, like, not even my husband, until he read the book. And I wouldn't let him read it till I left Hawaii. And I was on a plane. I was like, okay, here, I'm leaving. It's like so raw and personal. And I think as I was writing it, I got so caught up in, I was working with Justin on it and my older son, Dylan, and it was so healing. And I got so caught up, but logically, I know if you write a book and find a publisher, maybe that someone might read it someday. But in my head, I'm just writing a story. Journey. So it wasn't about people reading it. So that's why, and by the time I did get a publisher, I was like, oh, wow, now it's too late to take out all the embarrassing stuff and the deep, deep, deep pain, which I think is what makes it powerful, is that it's so unfiltered. So it is a book about, addiction is such a horrible thing. And I think most everybody either has been in it themselves or knows somebody that has, even if it's not in your direct family, it's someone down the street or in your neighborhood or whatever. And having been through what I call a living nightmare, if you can help people and share that story and maybe even encourage others to get help and maybe not handle it how I did, handle it in a more healthy way, then we're all about it. And honestly, my son, Justin, as I was writing it and him and I were working on it together, when it really hit me, oh, wow, this is going to be, because you get in the writing part as opposed to someone reading it. So when we got there, I'm calling Justin, hey man, my grandkids, your children could read this. And he was like, awesome. They'll know how good God is. And it's like, but what about this? And I would call him when I got insecure. And he was like, Mom, this is good. We're supposed to be doing it. He was just like that strength.
And I love that this is something you two did together.
Yeah.
And when did you decide that it was going to be something you were going to do together?
I don't feel like anything was a real sound decision. It's of course, when I started writing it, I told him, this is in the introduction, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. It could be a journal for the family. Maybe it's just for healing for me and you. I don't know. What do you think? And so he read part of it.
This was the time where he sat with it and didn't say anything.
And I'm just dying inside, but I'm cool, whatever. Take your time. But inside, it's then that I realized, wait, this is my heart. Even Justin reading it was hard because I'm there wasn't a ton about him yet in the book, but what I got from him after I read it was oh man, I'm proud of you, Mom. Let's do it. This, it's got to be raw and it's got to be the truth, and let's do it together. And so from there, it just, the whole way that kind of transpired is really cool because I had no training. I didn't even take webinars on how you write. I just started writing. And so then I would have an experience. I'd talk to him and go, oh man, Mom, here's how I remember that. And so we started sharing perspectives. And I think Justin is a good writer. His writing is all filtered through me, but it's his voice. Okay. So I think that's why you hear a very distinct difference in my narrating and his, because these are his words. Yeah. So, and some of those chapters, I would send to him and he'd call me back, because he's in Washington State. I'm in Hawaii doing this. He's like, no, it was this way. And I was like, it was? Wow. And then when Dylan, my oldest son, did a chapter, I just sobbed for days because I don't think I ever really asked him those questions. Yeah. And his perspective and how he handled it was so opposite of mine, So I think it just fell together in a really powerful way. Yeah. But it wasn't like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we have all the different perspectives, because that might be powerful for people. It just naturally, I feel like God led us to that.
Yeah. I think that makes it even more powerful as I was reading it anyways, that it wasn't this planned, scripted. I think part of the story even makes it that much more powerful. And you had shared that if you could touch one person. So I just want to share with you that before I even, and Alyssa said it was the first book she finished this year. I read it in how many hours? I sat down. I read it in like 4 hours. I just sat down and just started turning pages. So it drew me in. But before I even read it, and before we knew you were going to come join us here, I've had multiple clients share with me that a friend read it and thought of them and passed it on, and that they had gained something from it. So just so you know, you are affecting people.
It's amazing.
And they're finding
hope.
Yeah.
That
I did love the alliteration, by the way. The heroin, heartache, and hope. I just have to speak as a grammar nerd really quick. I loved the alliteration.
It gives so much hope to the readers because addiction impacts every person in that circle, not just the person who's struggling, right? So when we look at the book, Counting Spoons, it says a memoir of heroin, heartache, and hope. I had no idea what Kathryn's story was. I just heard she was reading a book and I'm like, oh, how awesome. I want to support her. And I read heroin and I was like, what? And I even had to ask my husband, how do you spell heroin? Because I was thinking heroin like a hero in a book or a female, hero.
That tracks.
And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a spoon on the cover. I think it's about drugs.
Yeah.
And then it all hit me.
Yeah.
And it was so beautifully captured. And hopefully you guys have the time to make time to read this book, especially if you've ever struggled with addiction yourself or watch somebody walk through it, because it does capture everybody's story, not just the person struggling with the addiction, but the parent and the siblings and the family. And it's so beautifully put together. And it's really cool to hear how organically it came to be. Right. And now it's just all wrapped up in this like pretty little book.
Yeah. It is pretty.
I know.
Someone thought it was a cooking book.
This is random, but it is so soft. I don't know how you picked the cover, but I have literally everybody in my family. Just feel the book.
That's so awesome.
It's just so soft.
It's another form of self-soothing, guys. Just rub the book.
I am super particular. Like, I am not, I like the simplicity of things. I don't like a lot of color. I never wear a lot of color. So this, even the feel of it, I talked to my publisher. I was like, I want a texture of some sort of whatever.
I'm not crazy. That was a design decision.
It was intentional.
Just so you know, it was very well received.
I'm so glad. That's awesome.
Now, all of you guys watching this are going to catch us as we're doing this, as we're petting the book during this interview. Okay, back to Kathryn. Kathryn, what was it like for you to recognize that your son was struggling with addiction? And at what age did you recognize these signs?
And I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said, that there probably wasn't an actual decision to sit down and write this book. I'm also guessing there was not one moment and after having reading this, there's not one moment where it was, oh, this is what's happening. There's all of these little signs. And then it gets to...
Yeah, and I talk a little bit about this in the book that, I grew up around addiction. I dabbled in drugs myself. I felt like I have some wisdom in terms of everything from doing drugs to incarceration. I mean, I've been exposed to things in my life. So I felt like I kind of had a beat on stuff. So, single mom, and I've got these 2 boys that are like, you could pull up to the house and feel the testosterone. I mean, these guys were just like, it was a lot. And they're into sports and they're into girls and they're active. And I mean, it's all those things. And so... And we had been through a difficult divorce. So I knew that the boys had some underlying anger. And so I was just like, okay, what can I do? I mean, I wasn't excited to have kids. I never dreamed of that. But man, when I had them, these guys, I cherished them and I adored who they were as people and how they were thriving and very much into sports, which was cool, But I noticed a shift as Justin got into high school. Justin was just a lot. Dylan was not. He was steady and easy, but Justin was just and very much an extrovert. And so I noticed some things and, found out he was drinking and dabbling and stuff, but never anything that seemed to get a grip on him and he'd get his punishment or whatever. But he was doing a lot more than I thought, a lot earlier than I thought. So he was dabbling even in junior high. And I went through their backpacks. Man, I used to say to them, don't expect privacy. I mean, I respect you, but I'm your mom and you guys are busy and going all over the place. I'll be checking. And, I was very present. But that last year, his senior year, there are some things that happened. Tragedy happened. Justin, I feel like his identity was wrapped up in sports and kind of being, the guy on campus. And then there was a sequence of events that happened. He ended up getting expelled and I was working. My oldest son got a baseball scholarship. So he's in Chico playing ball. So it's me and Justin is all of a sudden like out of school and he's isolated and he got depressed. And so there was this year of trying to figure out, is he depressed? Is he sick? He's not looking good. I mean, the kid was always like a fiend about working out and health. And, the friends started kind of going away and he was doing just shady stuff. And there's all these little signs and I knew he was doing drugs. So I started buying drug tests and checking him a lot, like trying to control things. But I did not know it was heroin. And when I found out, that blindsided me. That rocked me to my absolute core. And from there, it was like a 6-year journey of, drugs and rehabs. And he was good at rehab. I mean, that was his thing. Like my kid didn't do anything little. So even if he committed to the rehab, he'd go. And then he was like the champion and he was doing the best. And he was, he'd gain his weight back and he's working out. But I didn't realize then it was like the extremes, just one to the next. So he'd go through these rehabs and he would graduate. And I'm like, cool, we're done. Like that's over. Thank goodness, let's get our life back together. But then each relapse was worse. And he'd go through another one and another one. And it was a long
roller coaster, right?
6-year nightmare.
And what was that like for you as a parent, witnessing the completion and then witnessing the regression and the relapse?
So mad. I mean, sadness was hard for me. Like sadness made me not want to walk outside. It made me just want to isolate and sit in my closet in the corner and rock back. I mean, but anger, came a little more natural. I was so mad. I was just furious. And anger also can be a motivator for me. So I definitely had problems with control. I cherish these guys and I just would watch them and be like, you idiot. Like, what are you doing? And to watch him destroy, like my baby, to watch him do something to himself that changed his look and his appearance and his heart. And he began, chivalry was really important. So my kids were, I took care of my elderly parents and they opened the doors and just very kind, loving, gracious gentlemen.
I think one of my favorite stories in the book was about how, I think it was prom.
Yeah.
And he went to show grandma.
Yeah.
Grandma,
my mom.
His date and their outfit. And that, I don't know, I loved that. And that speaks to the personality.
Yeah, such a kind heart. Justin was just the sweetest. And it just like, I couldn't reconcile like the addiction and then my kid. And I'm like, you're doing this to yourself. So each relapse, and it's interesting as I look back, we'd go to the counseling and the family meetings and all those things. And they kept telling me like, expect relapse. I'd be like, excuse me. I would not have it. I was like, no, that is, my kid's not
an option.
We're not going to go back through that again. Are you kidding me? There's no way it's not an option. And I just, every time it would happen, I'd hear their voice and I just get like
more mad, I would imagine.
Pissed. Yeah. It's just like, when will this end? So, and that's the hard part is like you start to like lose confidence that, okay, he's got the rehab down, but it's the outside world. He can't seem to navigate. And what was happening is Justin would go to rehab and he'd get back to where he was before drugs, but then he was still searching for something. So he'd go right back to him. Like it was the most confusing. Yeah. I mean, it was, I've been through a lot in my life. I have suffered loss and I have dealt with a lot of things, but nothing compares to, it's, I'd been surrounded by addiction and I worked, in a program that offered support. And I could navigate that. Like logically, I knew what to tell people and how to navigate that. But when the claws of addiction sink into the skin of someone like you love, like your baby or your partner or whatever, like it changes the whole game. Like all that advice I would give and the resources and here's how you do it, navigate it, that like totally went out the door for me. Like, no, this is my kid, which I'm sure, a million people say that every day, but this is my Justin. No, I just was like, I won't accept it. Yeah. But it just kept happening. So it was.
In that 6 years, how did you take care of yourself?
Did you take care of yourself?
Well, I would have said I did. It's interesting because I've always, like you described me at work, and I've always independent, very young. Like I moved out super early, did my thing because I wanted to live life a certain way. I think I was good at my job because I was non-emotional leader. It's like black and white, fair, not fair. I don't care who you are. Even if we're homies at work, but you've done something, I'm going to talk to you about it. Like it's a non-emotional kind of way. And I also was fiercely independent. So I'm a single mom trying to raise these boys. And like, I sort of wore my independence like a badge of honor. I mean, I was very much just determined. And I think in my head, when this stuff started, two things happened for me. I was super private, like always have been. I remember at work, someone saying they were inviting me to like a baby shower or something. And I heard one of our team members say, it's nice to invite her. She's never going to come. She will not, like, I didn't want to mix my professional life. It doesn't mean I don't love you and I don't dig you and want to hang out with you, but I just don't blend those worlds. I wouldn't share my favorite color with people, much less the fact that my kid's going through addiction. And I in my warped like way of thinking, I really didn't think anybody could help me. I was like, I know what I need to know. I know how to navigate things. I'm strong. I'll figure this out. I mean, I've since learned so like not the case, but I always looked at it as my son is broken. I'm cool. Like I didn't recognize this was even trauma till after I wrote this. And I had readers saying, man, how'd you deal with your trauma? And I was like,
what trauma?
My trauma?
I didn't have an addiction.
No, that was him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did things all I think some of the characteristics that I had that weren't actually healthy, like my need for order. I did a lot of cleaning, man. My stepdaughter would drive up. Oh man, I can smell the pine saw before I even walk in the house. Do we walk in or not? Yeah, but I had this like insatiable need for order. I worked out a lot. It was kind of like trying to white knuckle through it. But like, I mean, I was so sleep deprived. I wasn't eating. I was thin. I functioned best at work because I could get into that zone. But my outside, I just didn't share it like with anyone. Yeah. I did not.
And not just at work, because, we recognize you had that role where some degree of separation was necessary in order to be able to effectively do your job. But it sounds like it was not just that factor, right? Even with your close friends, husband, my sister, who's we are like best friends. Like we talk about everything. And even then, like I blocked her out. And it wasn't just I have a big support system, a big family. A lot of people love me and my boys. And so they would offer, but it wasn't like this gentle, I don't want to talk about it. It was like, I remember someone I loved coming by the house and saying, I'm worried about Justin. I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, I'm just like worried about Justin. And my posture and everything was almost like, say something. I mean, not in a good way. Defensive.
And I said, do you have a question? And he goes, no. And he just gave me a hug and he left. But that was like, I couldn't even say the words out loud. It's just it's strange as I look back now, of how that really did affect me, just carrying the whole burden on my own. I was just, that's why like, when I talk about this and my rescue and my son's rescue, is like Justin's brokenness was very obvious. I mean, you could look at him and see that he was broken and in need, that he was struggling, and you would look at him and say he's addicted to drugs and he's homeless, all those things. But you look at me and you'd be like, she seems wound up and she's a little thinner than she should be, but it wasn't apparent. My brokenness was not on display. But man, I was shattered.
And you made it very clear that it was not going to be on display.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And I think it was a prideful thing. Like, you are strong enough. You can do this or whatever. And I look back and man, there's one part where I go to I call it church camp, but it was a women's retreat. And I'm in this, it's Celebrate Recovery group. And this mom shares about this horrible thing she's going through and just so openly. And I'm just sitting there I can't even speak. And I left going, gosh, that's strength. Actually, I felt so weak that day and just so unequipped to manage everything that was going on and watch this young lady just bare her soul and how people loved her and rallied around her. And that was the first time like my eyes kind of opened up a bit, but I still didn't talk, Yeah.
And I think that you speak to something that oftentimes we have this idea of ourselves, and I can relate to that. Right. You identified you've always been independent. I don't necessarily identify as independent, but I can relate to the idea of having this vision of yourself. In your case, wasn't just when Justin started dabbling, but you've always been on the more private side. You've always been independent, capable. And then when we have a stressor in life, in this case, your son's addiction, that challenges that, we have trouble recognizing that both can be true. So you can still be a completely capable, independent, successful individual and also open up to this idea of support or allowing ourselves to experience the sadness when typically we would channel that into anger to stay motivated and all of that, right? What does that look like? It's hard to consolidate those two versions and recognize that they can both exist. Just because I open up to my sister or just because I share this or allow myself to be vulnerable does not cancel out the fact that I am strong, capable, resilient.
Absolutely. And I feel like it really was like, as I look back on those days, I was like in that survival mode. It was like my instincts, people have complimented me on like tough love approach. I was like, oh no, there was no strategic, here's how I'm going to handle it. It was pure instincts and
not even one day at a time, but like one instance
at a time.
Like
one motion, one movement, one breath, like at a time, just very robotic. And now I like God has changed like I said, my whole lens. It's like I rejoice in my weaknesses because that's where his grace covers me. And now I have sisters in Christ that I met these moms whose kids were going through the same thing like later. And we're still good friends. And I remember the first time I actually like openly shared and they like their reaction. And then we ended up like laughing and loving each other. And we still like talk all the time. And man, I was like, oh, that's support.
So what was that like for you? That first time that you recall actually opening up in that way?
It was such a trip because the first time it's in here that I was driving home from work. I had to leave early. I literally couldn't handle the sadness. So I just go to this random church. I meet this guy who works there and talks to me. And I'm like shaking. It's right here. I can no longer suppress the tears and the sorrow and just anything. It's like, he's going to die out there. What am I going to do? And as we're having this conversation, I notice the guy smiling.
Which is as you're bearing your heart and soul. Why are you smiling?
Did you not hear what I said?
I'm like, okay, I thought this was going good, but this dude is entertained by my tears. So what the heck's going on? And then he said, look, I'm sorry, but and he was a heroin addict for years. And it was like this,
it's one of those moments in life.
One of those moments. So it's a week we talked and I left there and I felt like the heaviness was lighter, But then if you fast forward, Justin actually was in the blackout period in the final program that he was at, and he went to a graduation for another program that was like his. And a mom got up and was speaking, and they're from Modesto.
Really?
And then her kid got up, and they actually were at rival high schools and knew of each other. And so after as Justin's watching this, because my kid is like, I'm private. He's like super like, outgoing or whatever. He's darling. I mean, just a good kid. But anyway, so he stays after and he goes up and introduces himself and he says, you've got to meet my mom, and gave her my number. So he tells me that later. I'm like, okay, first of all,
your emotional response, you could read it in the pages. You just do such an amazing job of expressing yourself.
Are you insane?
Thank you, but no thank you.
Thanks, but I am not, what? Why would I do that? Anyway, that person is one of my dearest friends. And so the first time, and then I didn't want her to have my number. I was so weird. It was just a trip, but I felt something when I talked to her. And the first thing she shared with me is like how handsome Justin is and how healthy he looks. And you must be so proud. And I just that made me breathe easy, because you're always waiting for that call. Like, this is going to work, or he left, or something seems off with him. And so when we met, there was actually at one point, there was 6 of us moms that would meet once a month for dinner. And it's like all the pressure started to ease and the love started to grow. And I found myself talking more and laughing more and smiling more. Mm-hmm. And I just realized this is, my sister kept trying to tell me, go to a support group, a small group or whatever. I'm like, no, not even considering it. But I get it. They're my lifeline. Mm-hmm. And now I pray to God that Justin never relapses. He's got almost 7 years clean. But if he did, or someone else I love, 7 years. Yeah. So good. But I would definitely be calling on my friends. I'd be talking it through. I would be open. It would just be a whole different thing. It'd still be terrible and it would still be suffering. But the way I would manage that would be just a whole different story. And I when I wrote this book, I was preparing my heart for judgment. And I was preparing my heart. I knew I'd have support, but I was just preparing for the other stuff, because it's this is my kid and this is our story and it's my heart. And oh my goodness, how is that going to be perceived?
This is what you spent how many years protecting?
Yeah. Oh, right.
Right. And you kept it private to protect it.
I never thought of it that way.
And but now,
any stranger can read it. Yeah. But, what was I saying? You got me with that. That was really powerful.
We squirrel here.
We do.
Yeah. What was I saying?
Judgment. We were preparing for judgment.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm glad she remembered, because I don't know. I got
that was just, I knew this was my heart, but I didn't think about it being that whole 7 years in here. And that was powerful, Nikki. But I have been met with nothing but love and encouragement and support and just prayers. And I've had dozens of people reach out and say, I feel like you wrote my story. You know what I mean? And it's that. So I cry every day by God's grace and how he's using our story, because I really was prepared for the worst and receiving more love and joy and support than ever could have imagined. So.
And Kathryn, that's why we have you here today, because we want your story to keep spreading, because obviously Nikki and I read it. We very much believe in the power of your story and how it can help others. And we're hoping that as you're listening or watching to this episode with Kathryn Inman, that you are also feeling touched and it is giving you whatever support you need in this moment. And we'll also tell you where to get the book, because it's awesome. And if anything, you can just pet the book all day because it's so soft.
I love that you guys noticed that. No one has said that to me, so I'm really happy.
I noticed the details. So cool. And the minimalist cover that you were talking about really spoke to my heart too. So
I do love this title, because after I understood what the whole story is, and you do have, very one specific incident or a series of incidents of how you came to this title, it's really powerful. So we encourage you guys to read the book. Or if you have this book, pass it to a friend.
Yeah,
definitely pass it along to
And like I said, I've got several clients who a friend's written. I don't know how the friends heard about it or who shared it with them, but they immediately thought of somebody and said, you need to read this. And sure enough, they're coming. They don't know that I know you, right? And they're coming to me saying, I just read this book and it's not just me. That's what somebody said was, it's not just me.
That just makes my heart happy to hear that. Thanks, guys.
If our listeners took just one thing out of our conversation with you today, what would you want them to know?
You know, there's so many things, but I really believe that no one is too far gone. I mean, if you read this story, you're going to hear about how my son went from a healthy, happy teenage boy to a criminal living a life that he shouldn't have survived. But he did. So I want to say, like, never give up hope. No one is too far gone. And that to tap into the resources. There's so many out there. You are not alone. I have a website. That's where this book, you can read some of my blogs, but there's also a private email. And if I can support someone and Justin's available, there has been families that we have connected with where I've prayed with the parents and Justin has connected to their child that's going through it. A couple times we got him into programs. So there's nothing like he's been through it. And you also can't get anything over on Justin. Like, he'll call people out because he's been there, you know? So we want to offer that and just say, like, tap into the resources. There's so many different Celebrate Recovery programs and even just friends and family. Like, no one should go through this alone. And if I can help in any way, I'm so down for it. And my son is too. So that's what I would say.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that not only are there resources for the individual living with addiction, but as we've spent time talking about, there's support and resources for those affected, whether it be family, friends, partners, because I think there's a parallel process that occurred here, if I'm hearing you correctly, and that Justin had to get to the place where he could accept the support, and you also had to get to a place where you could accept your own version of support. So
separately and then, I mean, Justin and I talk probably 3 or 4 times a day. I mean, he's just, it's interesting when you've had nothing. I mean, he, humbling experience for me and for my son. And so I think, I always felt like I was not a judging person, Justin too, but that is like extremely on the other side. Like I think there is, when people read that, there's a freedom knowing. I even had someone say, and it was cute, I wasn't offended at all, but she was like, man, I thought my kid was bad. And then I read this. So I feel like so much.
Thank you so much for writing this, Kathryn.
But I dug that. Like I can hear it. You know what I mean? So,
it's a raw insight into human experience.
Yeah. We ended up that there was a content warning in the beginning of the book, and that was like the last week before we printed. And I'm so glad we did, because for a lot of folks that have experienced this, it can be triggering. And I've had a lot of people say, I read a couple chapters and I put it down, get back to it after a week or so. So, but we had to show how bad it gets to show how good it can be
and how much hope.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So where can our listeners find you, Kathryn?
Okay, my probably the easiest way is my website. It's KathrynMaeinman.com. And on there's links to the book. So it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. And then there's also the email. So you can email me and you can get a taste of my writing. There's I've written 6 blogs or something. So that's the easiest way. And if people reach out and I can support them, then I'll exchange phone numbers and that kind of thing too. So
how far we've come, not wanting somebody to have your phone
right
number. Now here it is.
It's available to anyone.
I am no longer as private, obviously.
And do you have a social media account or anywhere that
I do.
Listeners can follow it?
I'm sorry. Yes, on the website the links are there, but I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, but I haven't really done that yet. But yeah, so Instagram I'm there a lot, and Twitter too. But
and we will link all of these in our show notes. But it is Kathryn with a K.
Yeah.
Inman, INMAN. So we will link that so our viewers can find you more readily and easily. But we are just so appreciative that you are here today and sharing with us.
Yeah, same. I appreciate it, you guys. This has been a really good experience. And I also just want to say that I, have known you guys for quite some time now and super proud of you. I mean, this is good stuff. And people need to be, especially in the world today. Addiction is worse now. There's fentanyl out there that's 100 times stronger than heroin. People are dying every single day. And then, with COVID and mental health, and people need to be hearing these stories and support. So I applaud you and support you guys. too.
Thank
I just
you
love what
so
you're doing.
Feeling
So.
is mutual.
Yay! Kathryn, thank you for helping us make mental health relatable for our entire TU crew listening. And if you guys would like to access the show notes, which we encourage you to do, there's going to be a lot of good resources there. Please go to www.therapistuncut.com. And as always, thank you for allowing us into your lives and helping us make mental health relatable and a part of your everyday conversation.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.